The girl in the wreckage. The desert winds howled across the barren landscape, whipping sand into the air as Ethan adjusted the scarf covering his face. He had spent the last few years alone, scavenging what he could from old wrecks scattered across the wasteland. The planet was a graveyard of forgotten battles, filled with derelict ships and ruined technology from wars no one cared to remember. But today, something was different. A fresh trail of smoke curled in the distance. "Damn," Ethan muttered, narrowing his eyes. That wasn't an old wreck, it was recent. His instincts told him to turn back. New crashes meant danger. Could be pirates. Could be something worse. But curiosity got the better of him. Tightening his grip on the rifle slung over his back, Ethan guided his speeder toward the smoldering wreckage. As he approached, the full extent of the crash came into view. The ship wasn't large, just a single-pilot escape pod, its hull scorched from re-entry. And then he saw her. A figure half buried in the sand, silver-white hair tangled around delicate, pointed features. An alien girl. A fragile survivor. Ethan jumped off his speeder, kneeling beside the unconscious figure. Her breathing was shallow, her skin an unusual shade of violet, and she wore a torn flight suit with insignias he didn't recognize. "Hey," he said, nudging her shoulder. "You alive?" No response. His gut twisted. She needed medical attention. Fast. With a grunt, Ethan scooped her up in his arms and carried her to his speeder. She was lighter than expected, almost unnaturally so. "What the hell were you doing out here?" he muttered, kicking the engine into gear and speeding toward his shelter. Strange behavior. Ethan's home was little more than a reinforced bunker, hidden beneath the ruins of an old outpost. Inside, he laid the girl on a cot and checked her vitals. After cleaning her wounds, he injected a mild stim shot to help her regain consciousness. Within minutes, her eyelids fluttered open. Her gaze locked onto him instantly. Bright, luminous eyes that shimmered like liquid silver. Ethan took a cautious step back. "You with the syndicates? Pirates?" She stared at him, confused, then whispered, "Where am I?" "Middle of nowhere," Ethan replied. "Found you in a crashed pod. Lucky you didn't burn up on entry." She struggled to sit up, wincing. "You saved me?" "Wasn't about to leave you for dead." Ethan crossed his arms. "Who are you?" She hesitated, as if debating whether to answer. "Lysara." "Lysara, huh?" Ethan studied her. She was wary, but not hostile. "You remember what happened?" Lysara's eyes flickered toward the door. "I was running." Ethan frowned. "From who?" She bit her lip, then shook her head. "It's not safe to tell you." Ethan sighed. "Great. So you're just gonna sit there and be mysterious?" She flinched, as if she hadn't expected him to press the issue. "Look, Lysara. I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but if someone comes looking for you, I need to know what I'm dealing with." She exhaled, looking down at her hands. "You don't want to be involved." Ethan scoffed. "Too late for that." Signs of something more. As the hours passed, Lysara grew restless. Ethan watched as she moved through the bunker with eerie precision, her senses sharp, her reactions too quick for someone who had just survived a crash. And then there was the way she reacted to the old hollow terminal in the corner. The moment it flickered to life, she stiffened. Her fingers clenched as the symbols on the screen changed. "Something wrong?" Ethan asked. Lysara forced a smile. "Just, unfamiliar with human technology." But Ethan wasn't convinced. She knew exactly what she was looking at. A warning comes too late. Later that night, while Lysara was resting, Ethan sat by the entrance of the bunker, rifle across his lap. His mind was racing. Who was she really? And more importantly, who was she running from? His answer came sooner than expected. His radio crackled to life. A distorted voice spoke. This is a priority alert. Any independent salvagers, be advised, a highly dangerous fugitive has been spotted in the region. Substantial rewards for information or capture. Ethan's breath caught. They were looking for her. And judging by the urgency in the voice, whoever she was worth a fortune. He glanced back toward the sleeping girl. Lysara wasn't just some lost traveler. She was something far more dangerous. And Ethan had just dragged himself into the middle of it. The secret she carries. Ethan turned off the radio, his grip tightening around the device. He had seen plenty of bounty notices before, escaped criminals, rogue mercenaries, even high-ranking defectors. But this was different. There was a desperation in the transmission, a warning laced beneath the promise of a reward. Lysara wasn't just wanted. She was hunted. He exhaled, rubbing his temples. He should turn her in. It was the logical thing to do. He could collect the reward, move off this dying rock, and never look back. But as he looked at her, curled up in his spare cot, her breathing still unsteady, he hesitated. She didn't look like a threat. Yet something about her didn't add up. And Ethan needed answers. A fragile truce. Morning came, and Lysara stirred, her silver eyes fluttering open. Ethan was already awake, standing by the bunker entrance, rifle in hand. "You're famous," he said, nodding toward the radio. Her body went rigid. "Someone's offering a nice reward for you." "Dangerous fugitive, what exactly are you running from?" Lysara sat up slowly, her expression carefully guarded. "It's complicated," she said. Ethan scoffed. "Yeah, I figured. But we don't have time for secrets. If bounty hunters are in the area, I need to know what I'm dealing with." Lysara's hands clenched into fists. For a long moment, she was silent. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "I wasn't supposed to exist." Ethan frowned. "What?" Lysara inhaled shakily. "I was created. An experiment. A perfect heir to the rulership of my homeworld. But something went wrong." Ethan's grip on his rifle tightened. "They were trying to make a better ruler?" She nodded. "Stronger. Faster. More intelligent. They wanted to engineer a leader who could bring order to the empire. But they feared me." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Why?" Lysara hesitated, then looked away. "Because they couldn't control me. More than just a princess." Lysara stood, pacing the small space of the bunker. "I was raised in isolation," she continued. "Taught by the Empire's greatest minds. Trained in combat before I could even speak fluently. They wanted me to be perfect. But I wasn't." Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "So what happened?" Her fingers twitched. "I questioned them. I asked why we needed to rule by force, why entire planets had to submit to our rule. And when they couldn't answer, I refused to obey." Ethan exhaled. "So they turned on you?" Lysara nodded. "I was marked as defective. Sentenced to be removed." Her voice was steady, but Ethan saw the flicker of pain behind her eyes. "I barely escaped," she whispered. "They tried to hunt me down. I managed to steal an escape pod and fled as far as I could." Ethan let out a low whistle. "So now your own people want you dead?" Lysara gave a bitter smile. "Not just dead. Erased. They can't allow a failed experiment to exist." Silence stretched between them. Ethan rubbed his jaw. "You're telling me you're some kind of super-powered princess, designed to be the ultimate ruler?" Lysara winced. "I wouldn't call myself a princess." "Right," Ethan muttered. And now bounty hunters are after you. Lysara's shoulders tensed. Which is why I have to leave. I can't stay here. I don't want to drag you into this. Ethan studied her. The way she held herself, coiled like a predator ready to flee. But he also saw something else. Exhaustion. Fear. And beneath it all, hope. She didn't want to run. She wanted someone to help her. Ethan sighed. Well, you're in luck. I've already been dragged into this. Lysara's eyes widened slightly. You're not turning me in. Ethan shrugged. I could use the money. But something tells me if I handed you over, I'd regret it. Lysara's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. The first attack. Before she could respond, an alarm blared through the bunker. Ethan stiffened, immediately grabbing his rifle. Lysara's breath caught. What is it? Ethan moved to a control panel, checking the surveillance feeds. His stomach dropped. 3 figures stood outside. Mercenaries. He cursed. Bounty hunters. They must have picked up a trace of your ship. Lysara's face darkened. They won't stop. Ethan glanced at her. You any good with a weapon? Her eyes flickered. I don't need one. Ethan raised an eyebrow, but there was no time to ask questions. Outside, the bounty hunters were moving in. One of them raised a megaphone. Whoever's inside, listen up. We know you're harboring a fugitive. Hand her over, and we won't burn your little hideout to the ground. Ethan rolled his shoulders. Real polite, aren't they? Lysara's fingers twitched. They won't let you live. Even if you hand me over, they'll kill you to keep it quiet. Ethan sighed. Figures. He checked his rifle. All right. You stay here. I'll. But before he could finish, Lysara moved. 1 second, she was standing beside him. The next, she was at the entrance, hand raised. Ethan barely had time to react before a shockwave of invisible energy burst outward, knocking the entire bunker door off its hinges. Outside, the bounty hunters stumbled back in shock. Lysara stepped forward, eyes glowing. You want me? Her voice rang with power. Then come and take me. Ethan blinked. Oh. She wasn't just some experiment. She was something far worse. And the bounty hunters had no idea what they had just walked into. The unleashed power. The desert wind howled through the ruined entrance of Ethan's bunker. Outside, the 3 bounty hunters barely had time to react before Lysara stepped forward, her silver eyes glowing like molten stars. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to duck, to take cover, but his feet remained rooted to the ground. What was she? The leader of the bounty hunters, a grizzled man with cybernetic implants and a heavy plasma rifle slung over his back, was the first to recover. Open fire, he barked. The 2 mercenaries flanking him hesitated for only a second before raising their weapons. But they never got the chance to pull the trigger. Lysara moved. 1 moment, she stood at the threshold of the bunker. The next, she was in front of the nearest bounty hunter, her hand wrapping around the barrel of his rifle. Metal groaned as her fingers crushed the weapon like it was made of paper. The mercenary gasped in shock, stumbling backward. Impossible. Lysara didn't let him finish. She twisted, her leg sweeping out in a fluid motion, sending the man flying backward into the sand. The second mercenary fired his plasma rifle in panic. The shot streaked through the air. And stopped mid-flight. Ethan's breath hitched as the energy bolt froze, hovering inches from Lysara's outstretched palm. She clenched her fist, and the plasma round imploded, vanishing in a swirl of energy. The remaining bounty hunters paled. She's a... Before the leader could finish, Lysara struck. She shot forward, her movements a blur. Her palm slammed into the leader's chest, sending him crashing into the rocky outcrop behind him. Sand and debris exploded around them. Silence followed. The last bounty hunter, still conscious, scrambled backward, dropping his weapon. I surrender, he gasped. Lysara turned toward him, her glowing eyes dimming slightly. Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she was fighting for control. She wanted to finish the fight. But she didn't. Instead, she exhaled slowly, stepping back. Leave, she said. The mercenary didn't need to be told twice. He turned and ran, disappearing into the dunes. Lysara turned back to Ethan. His rifle was still gripped in his hands, but he hadn't fired a single shot. His mind was still reeling from what he had just witnessed. Lysara wasn't just an experiment. She was a living weapon. A difficult conversation. Inside the bunker, Ethan paced back and forth. Lysara sat on the edge of the cot, silent. Ethan finally stopped, rubbing his temples. Okay. You want to tell me what that was? Lysara hesitated. I told you. I was engineered to be, more. Ethan scoffed. Yeah, no kidding. He turned to face her. You stopped a plasma bolt in midair. You broke a rifle with your bare hands. How? Lysara's fingers curled around the fabric of her tunic. They enhanced me, she admitted. Beyond what they thought possible. Strength, reflexes, energy manipulation. They wanted the perfect ruler, someone who could not only command but enforce. Ethan exhaled. And when you refused to be their weapon, they tried to kill you. Lysara nodded. They didn't want a ruler who could think for herself. Ethan studied her for a moment. There was something in her eyes. Something beyond just survival. She wasn't just running. She was hiding. But from what? So what's your plan? He asked. Lysara looked up at him. I don't know. Not exactly reassuring. Lysara sighed. I just need to stay off their radar. Long enough to figure out my next move. Ethan frowned. That's not gonna be easy. Those bounty hunters were just the beginning. More will come. Lysara exhaled sharply. I know. Ethan glanced at the wreckage outside. Well, I guess that means I'm in this now. Lysara's eyes widened slightly. You don't have to help me. Ethan let out a dry chuckle. Too late for that. I doubt your friends are gonna believe I had nothing to do with this. Lysara hesitated. I don't want you to be in danger because of me. Ethan shrugged. Danger's kinda part of the job. Besides, he met her gaze. You need someone to watch your back. Lysara studied him, searching for deception. But there was none. Finally, she nodded. Then we need a plan. The bounty grows. Far beyond the desert, on a distant space station orbiting a red dwarf star, a hooded figure sat before a massive holographic screen. A transmission flickered to life. Report. The image of a wounded bounty hunter appeared. We found her. But she's not alone. The hooded figure leaned forward. Explain. The bounty hunter swallowed. She has a human with her. A soldier. Skilled. He fought with her. The hooded figure's fingers twitched. A human? Yes. And he's helping her. Silence stretched for several moments. Then, the hooded figure spoke. Increase the bounty. Double it. The bounty hunter stiffened. Double? The hooded figure's voice was calm. Lysara is dangerous. But a human who fights for her? That's a wild card we can't allow. The transmission cut out. On the screen, new bounty notices began flashing across the galactic network. The hunt was far from over. Hunted across the stars. The universe had grown smaller for Ethan and Lysara. Every safe haven had become a potential trap, every starport a risk, every planet a battlefield. The bounty on Lysara's head had only increased, and now, with Ethan listed as her accomplice, they were being hunted across the galaxy. There was no going back. They needed a plan. Ethan checked the stolen starship's navigation screen. The engine was running hot from their last jump, and they couldn't afford another hyperspace leap until it cooled. They had a few hours at best before bounty hunters caught up. Lysara sat across from him, deep in thought. Her silver eyes flickered in the dim cockpit light. They won't stop coming. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. I know. We just need an edge. Lysara's fingers drummed against the metal table. There is one place we can go. But you won't like it. Ethan raised an eyebrow. At this point, I'll take any option that doesn't involve dying. Lysara exhaled. The outlaw world of Karis, 5. Ethan swore under his breath. Karis, 5 was a lawless, crime-ridden planet run by warlords and exiled mercenaries. It was dangerous, unpredictable, but also the one place where the most ruthless bounty hunters gathered. Ethan leaned back. You want to go to the heart of the enemy? Lysara met his gaze. No. I want to cut off the head. Landing on Karis, 5. The descent onto Karis, 5 was rough, turbulence shaking the ship as they broke through the thick smog that covered the planet. The air was toxic in most areas, the cities crumbling under centuries of crime and corruption. The moment they stepped onto the landing platform, Ethan could feel the eyes on them. Mercenaries, black market traders, information brokers, Karis, 5 was full of people who would sell their own kin for credits. Lysara pulled up the hood of her cloak. Stay close. Don't trust anyone. Ethan smirked. Wasn't planning to. Their goal was clear, find the leader of the bounty network and make them remove the price on Lysara's head, one way or another. The underworld deal. Navigating through the neon-lit streets of Karis, 5, they arrived at a dingy cantina called the Rusted Fang. It was where bounty hunters gathered to sell their kills and get their next contracts. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of alcohol, sweat, and burning plasma. Ethan kept one hand close to his hidden weapon, while Lysara scanned the crowd. Then she saw him. A towering figure in the back, surrounded by heavily armed guards, Dakar Voss, the man who controlled the bounty network. Lysara took a breath. Let me handle this. She strode toward Dakar, who raised an eyebrow at her approach. Ah, the runaway princess. His voice was deep, amused. And the human fool helping her. Ethan crossed his arms. We need your bounty list updated. Take her off. Dakar chuckled. And why would I do that? Lysara met his gaze. Because I can offer something better. Dakar leaned forward, intrigued. I'm listening. Lysara hesitated. Then she said, I know the location of the lost vault of Zelvoran. Ethan's eyes widened. He had never heard of this before. Dakar's smirk faded. You're lying. Lysara's voice was steady. Am I? Dakar studied her for a long moment. Then, he grinned. You've got my attention. The betrayal. Dakar's men escorted them to a private chamber. Ethan leaned close to Lysara as they walked. Is this real? Lysara kept her voice low. It's real enough to get us in the door. Ethan sighed. I really hope you have a plan. Inside the chamber, Dakar motioned for his men to leave before turning to Lysara. Tell me what you know. Lysara smiled. I'll take you there myself. But first, you take my name off the bounty list. Dakar laughed. I'm afraid it doesn't work like that. In a flash, he drew a blade and lunged at Lasara. Ethan reacted instantly, pulling his gun and firing, but Dakar was fast, dodging the blast. Lasara blocked Dakar's attack with her enhanced strength, her silver eyes flashing with fury. Dakar grinned. You're strong, princess. But not strong enough. Suddenly, alarms blared. Lasara's breath hitched. What did you do? Dakar smirked. You think I wouldn't set a trap? Every hunter on this planet now knows you're here. Ethan cursed. We need to get out. Now. Lasara's eyes darkened. Then we fight. The doors burst open, bounty hunters flooding in. Ethan raised his gun. Lasara clenched her fists. The final battle had begun. The final stand. The desert winds howled outside the bunker as Ethan checked the last of his supplies. He and Lasara had spent the past few days moving from one hiding spot to another, barely staying ahead of the bounty hunters. But it was only a matter of time before they were cornered. And now, that time had come. Lasara stood by the entrance, her silver eyes glowing softly in the dim light. She had barely spoken since they received the latest transmission. The bounty on both of them had doubled. Every mercenary, bounty hunter, and assassin in the sector would be coming for them. They couldn't run anymore. Ethan slung his rifle over his shoulder and turned to her. If we stay here, we die. Lasara exhaled sharply. And if we run, they chase us. Then we make our stand. Lasara met his gaze. She saw no hesitation, no fear, just determination. She nodded. We fight. Preparing for battle. Ethan moved quickly, setting up tripwires and explosives around the bunker's perimeter. Lasara stood by his side, using her enhanced senses to detect movement in the distance. The first wave would be scouts. Testing them. Seeing if they were weak. They were in for a surprise. Ethan knelt by the last tripwire, securing it before glancing at Lasara. How are you feeling? Lasara flexed her fingers, energy humming beneath her skin. Stronger than before. Ethan smirked. Good. We'll need it. The first gunshot rang through the desert. Then all hell broke loose. The siege begins. Explosions rocked the sands as mercenaries charged toward the bunker, weapons blazing. Ethan took cover behind a fallen steel beam, returning fire with deadly precision. Lasara was already in motion. She darted between enemies, dodging plasma bolts with inhuman speed. With a single swipe of her hand, she sent a mercenary flying. Another charged her with a blade, only for Lasara to catch the weapon mid-swing and shatter it in her grip. Ethan took out a sniper perched on a rock formation before diving to avoid a grenade. Lasara, we're getting surrounded, he shouted. Lasara turned, her energy flaring as she raised both hands. A shockwave erupted from her body, sending the attackers tumbling like ragdolls. But more were coming. Ethan's jaw clenched. They just keep coming. Lasara's breath was ragged. We have to finish this. The final enemy. As the battle raged, a new figure emerged from the chaos. A tall, armored warrior with dark, gleaming armor and a helmet that concealed his face. He carried a massive energy blade that hummed with power. Ethan recognized the stance. A trained assassin. Lasara tensed. He's different. Ethan nodded. Yeah. And he's here for you. The assassin lunged. Lasara met him head-on, their clash shaking the ground beneath them. Sparks flew as her energy met his blade, and for the first time, Lasara struggled to hold her ground. Ethan took aim, but the assassin was too fast, twisting and using Lasara as a shield. Lasara gritted her teeth, eyes flashing dangerously. Enough. A surge of power erupted from her, knocking the assassin back. Before he could recover, she moved, faster than ever before. She struck his chest with both hands. The armor shattered. The assassin collapsed. Silence fell over the battlefield. The end of the hunt. The remaining mercenaries, seeing their strongest warrior fall, retreated into the darkness. Ethan lowered his weapon, breathing heavily. Lysara looked down at her trembling hands. The power within her was growing. Changing. Ethan stepped beside her. It's over. Lysara turned to him, her silver eyes searching his. For now. He nodded. Yeah. For now. As the two stood side by side, the desert wind carrying away the echoes of battle, they both knew one thing. This was just the beginning.